Hi, everyone. I'm Scott Brandley.
And I'm Alisha Coakley. Every member of the church has a story to share, one that can instill faith, invite growth, and inspire others.
On today's episode, we're going to hear how dating, divorcing, and remarrying has taught one woman that making the conscious choice to have the gospel in her life has helped to build her spiritual resilience and her faith in Christ. Welcome to Latter-day Lights. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Latter-day Lights. We're so glad you're here with us today, and we're really excited to introduce our special guest, Anjilee Ferguson. Anjilee, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Scott and Alisha, for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, we're super excited that you reached out to us. Scott and I always love when we don't have to go track people down and force them to be on our show when they actually come to us. It's such a nice nice break. So we really, really appreciate it, and appreciate you having the courage to actually do that too. Cause I know it's not always easy coming on here and being raw and real and, sharing things that are sacred to you. So we really, really appreciate it. So do our listeners.
Yeah. So Anjilee, you bet. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I am a recently published author. Pretty excited. My 9-year-old self is like, woohoo, you did it. And, I thought it would be writing something cool like Harry Potter or some fictional character that everybody would just love. But then I realized there was, more to my story. So I ended up writing my story. But when I'm not writing, I do work at BYU as a peer mentor supervisor. So I'm in the Office of First Year Experience there, and I help train upperclassmen to be peer mentors for the first year students that are coming in. So that's a pretty rewarding job. I really love it, being face-to-face and helping to mentor college students. So that's
Awesome.
kind of what I do on the side, I guess you could say, of writing and living life. And then, I also have had my hand in entrepreneurship. I co-founded an online school, and I kind of recently stepped back from the day-to-day leadership role, but I do still serve on the board, so I kind of consult and help with that as well. So that keeps me busy. And then, I'm a wife and a stepmom to a 9-year-old, and it's a lot of fun, keeps us busy. And that's me in a nutshell. I don't feel like it's anything too crazy or exciting.
Well, it's busy. That's for sure.
Busy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you get a nap today?
Not yet. Hopefully that's the hope.
There you go. That's the only way that I survive the week is a Sunday nap, right?
I feel that. So true.
Oh, awesome. And so you're obviously living in Utah, somewhere around BYU's campus, correct?
Yeah, I commute a little bit, but it's not too bad. So
gotcha. Very cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we'll probably talk about this too, but where's your book? What is it called? You want to give us a little bit of highlight there?
Yeah. So it's called Yes, No, Maybe So, a comedy of dating, divorce, and devotion. So a lot of alliteration for you.
That's my favorite thing in the whole writing world.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun. Once the publisher and I landed on that title, I was like, ooh, I really like this. So
very good. Very nice.
But yeah, you can find it on Amazon. It's on Audible. I did just finish recording an audiobook version. So for those that like audiobooks, like my husband, that's available on Audible. And then, it's on Amazon and then also on cedarfort.com.
That's cool. Did you read it yourself or did you get an actor, a voice actor?
I did read it myself. So that was kind of an interesting experience because I think we're all hypercritical of how our voices sound. And so listening to the playback, I tried editing it and then I gave up after a while and I said, maybe your team needs to edit this because I'm so particular and, all the things. So, but it worked out. It was a fun project for sure.
That's cool. Very cool. Yeah, well, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Well, we know that we're going to be talking about the things that you put in your book today. we don't want to delay that any further. So why don't you go ahead and tell us where your story begins?
Yeah. So, it's funny because I never thought that I would be writing about my story. I thought, oh, I can create fictional characters and do this thing and do writing, which I love. But as I got older and older in, the church culture, especially where I was still single in my 20s, I realized, wow, there's some value here. So really, I mean, my story kind of begins in high school, right? Like everybody's story does. You're trying to find yourself and who you are. You're dating when you're about 16. And I was so excited for that because I was fairly young for my class. So when I was a sophomore in high school, I was 15 the whole year because I was one of those summer birthdays, right? So I felt like I was kind of constantly playing catch up to my friends around me that were driving, dating, getting to experience all these things before I was. And so I had this excitement in dating because it seemed like, ooh, it's this thing that I finally get to do. And so, high school dating was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, had a lot of good experiences there. And then, I went on a mission at 21. So this kind of ages me because this was back when the age to go was 21.
Yep.
Right.
And so that was kind of always a goal I had since young women. I was like, I want to go on a mission. I think it would be great. And, what I always heard was, well, that's a great goal, but really your focus is to become a wife, right?
Yeah. It was kind of the backup goal, right? Or the backup plan.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. That's what I constantly heard was like, oh, that's awesome. And if there's not a righteous man that you're supposed to marry, then sure, go for it. Right.
Right.
And so that was kind of the stigma, I guess you could say, when I was growing up was like, your job is to get married and that's what you're here for. And so I think that shaped kind of a lot of the attitudes and expectations, I guess, that I had around dating. And so then when I graduated college when I was 20. And so I thought, well, what's next? And so then I decided a mission was the answer. And, even on my mission, it was funny because I would get comments like, well, how did you make it to the mission field? You're too cute. You should have been married before now. And, all these things. And I was like, wow.
Is that all it takes?
Yeah, right. Yeah. I was like, well, apparently I'm doing something wrong because here I am. Right. But yeah, I just remember thinking, is that really all people care about? Like, it seems like that's every conversation is, well, why aren't you dating? Why aren't you married? Don't you want to be married? Don't you want to be dating? And sometimes I was a little snarky and be like, no, I want to die alone, like, I'm trying, I'm doing the things. And so, yeah, I got back from my mission, did the whole singles ward scene. And yeah, it was just me and all of our mates, friends in the ward. We all kind of just felt this pressure and expectations, but like none of us knew how to do it right. It felt like we were just kind of living our lives. We had careers, we were working, and so I remember thinking, man, I've had some terrible date experiences, but I've also had some good ones. And when I would tell people my stories, they'd be like, there's no way that happened. And I'm like, I promise you, I'm not that creative. I can't make this up. Like this actually happened. And so I had several people say, your life with dating is like a sitcom. And I said, yeah, it kind of is. And so I just started writing these stories down to be like, well, what did I learn from this lesson? And how did this shape me? And, all the things. And so the book started really as just like a massive Word document with just all my thoughts dumped into a master document and slowly evolved into, hey, I could turn this into a book one day because these stories are crazy and they would make people laugh and they're relatable. And so I kind of wanted to write the book to be a guidebook for people that were maybe feeling some of the same things that I felt. Like, oh, am I not good enough? Am I doing the dating game wrong? Why is this person treating me this way? Like, where did I miss the mark? All the questions that single people over the age of 25 usually have in the church. Because it's definitely an interesting road to navigate, right? You're the single person in a family-centered church, And where do I fit in? How do I make this work when I'm trying? Right.
Gotcha.
And so that's kind of where the book started. And so when I got married the first time, I was 27. And it was still a goal of mine to publish this book because I still have friends that were in their late 20s, early 30s that were still single. They were still venting to me about the frustration of dating, the options that were out there, and just, all the frustrating things they're trying to just hold fast to the gospel and still keep their faith while also not giving up hope that they would find that person. And so I kept at it, right, while I was married the first time. And then I kind of got serious about writing it a little more. And then I got a total curveball thrown at me. And my ex-husband came to me and just said, I'm done. I don't want to be married anymore. And I was like, wow. Yeah, it was the bomb. I was shocked. Like,
how long were you guys married for?
We were married for 6 years.
Oh, wow.
So it wasn't necessarily a short marriage.
Right. Got some time invested.
And yeah, there was some time invested. And so it really did come out of left field for me. And I was kind of like, whoa, what just happened? And it was a very fast divorce process. Like, I came home from a trip and he said, I'm done. I've been unhappy for 3 years. Like, let's just be done and go our separate ways. He had a plan for moving on with his life. And I was just kind of left reeling. And I was like, whoa, okay. But before we end, this 6-year temple marriage, can we try counseling? Can we get you some help if there's other things you're dealing with? It totally blindsided me because nothing had changed about his behavior. He hadn't confided in me that he was feeling any of these things. And so it was really just kind of a gut punch, and yeah, so then I'm thinking, oh, wow, what I thought was my happily ever after is now, what did I do and how did I get here?
Right. And now you have to go back to that dating world. And you mentioned you had some crazy experiences. I don't want to ruin everything, but will you give us a little teaser of or an example or one of your favorite bad, weird, crazy experiences?
Yeah. So one that actually did not make the book, and I was, oh, dang, I should have mentioned this one, was so in the singles ward, right? They, you're kind of dating within that dating pool. And so it's a tricky scene to navigate sometimes if you try to date within the singles ward, right? Because if you're one person, they see you as you're with that person. And then if you break up, it's a whole thing, right?
Yeah.
And so there was...
Sorry, my nearly 16-year-old just told me there's a term for it nowadays. I'm gonna learn you guys something so new. It's called a situationship.
Oh, yes.
Okay. What? Have you heard this yet? I know. Scott's like, wait, what?
I've heard this term.
No.
I've heard
this term. Is the first time ever. I'm 41. Situationship. It's not a really relationship, but it's there's a situation happening and you guys are kind of committed to it, to seeing this situation out, but it's not anything,
ironclad. Yeah. No commitment, right? Well, that's a great word to describe this story I'm about to share. A situationship, right? So I was kind of interested in this guy. We had been super flirty at other activities, but he had seen me previously kind of going on dates with another guy, and then that kind of just fizzled out. But he decided he was going to invite me to a concert with some other friends in the singles ward. And so I was his date. We went along with a couple other people. Mostly, I think one of them was his best friend and his best friend's date. Well, we get to the concert. We're all sitting by each other. And it becomes clear very early on that he was there to flirt with his best friend's date.
Oh, no.
And so I was kind of just there as a person, right? And I'm thinking, oh, fine, I'm third wheeled again. I'm always this buffer person, right? And so it was just an awful situation. And I was like, why does this keep happening? I know that I'm a friendly person, but come on. At what point is someone actually going to be interested? And I'm not just the excuse to go flirt with another girl, right? That had happened more times than I would like to say, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that was one of them. And the worst part was the concert wasn't even that great. I was like,
Oh.
man, at least if
Didn't
it was
hear
good
me.
music, right? Yeah. It's like I could have salvaged it by at least enjoying the concert, but it was not great. So I was like, well, here we
Wow.
are. I'll just chill until it's over.
Oh man. Guys
So-
are turds sometimes.
They can be.
Yeah,
It's
we
so
are.
true.
Obviously not Scott. He's going on 20 something. How many years have you guys been married now? I don't know.
Yeah, but I was pretty shallow when I was dating.
Were you?
I once stopped dating a girl because I didn't like her shoes.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
And
That's pretty bad.
then I stopped dating another girl because one time we were like kind of wrestling around and her, this is weird, her nostril like stuck to the side of her nose.
I remember you
And I was
telling
like,
us.
I'm like, that's weird. I couldn't get over it. It was like, it's so shallow, so shallow.
He knows.
But anyway.
That's awesome. I love it, Scott. Well, and I love that you can, recognize, hey, I had a shallow phase in dating. And I think all of us did, right? Like, it's
Right.
funny because as I was writing this book, I was really nervous because I was like, I'm going to be writing about these raw, vulnerable details about what I was feeling and what I was experiencing as I went through a divorce. And, I never use his name. So it's not like I'm calling him out. And I was laughing because I was like, there's this delicate balance of like, do I look like I play the victim or do I look like I'm playing the blame game? And so I throw myself under the bus just as much as I throw him under the bus, right? Like,
Good.
It's a relationship. It takes two to tango, right? And I can fully recognize like, oh, I learned this and this and this, and this is how I could have been better, right? So rather than just saying it's all his fault, I kind of learned, well, what can I take away from this so that I can be a better person? Because obviously I can't control his agency. He's done. This marriage is over. But how do I make the most of it, right? Because it was a big blow, right? Like divorce was like the first quote unquote failure I felt like I had in my life. And I was like, man, that's a big one though. That's not just a little like, oh, I failed a class in college and I had to repeat it. Right. And so it became kind of an identity crisis a little bit, right? Because I was that person that had always had kind of like a stalwart testimony. I'd done everything right. I served a mission, and then I'm like, well, why me? Like, how did I care? Why is this happening? And so it really became a very introspective time in my life to be like, all right, I've learned more now than ever why agency matters, how it can affect people, and how am I going to use my agency to make the most of this really crappy situation.
Right.
And so that's again kind of what I tackle in the book. But it just, it was a bomb. It was, the time, I'd say that's probably the closest I've ever had to a faith crisis, where it was, kind of the initial party of like, well, why me? I did everything right. Like, what the heck? And kind of the anger and the processing. And, the stages of grief are very real. You go through anger, acceptance, and then you kind of have little setbacks here and there. And then you just kind of get to this place where, okay, I'm good. It is what it is. Right. Yeah. And it was really interesting timing too, because my divorce was finalized November of 2019. And then, as we all know, COVID hit.
Oh my gosh.
Like 4 or 5 months later.
Wow.
And and so then it became, how do I meet people now? Like, how do I put myself out there if I'm willing to,
Right.
And so it was a wild time of life. But in retrospect, like I look back and I'm kind of grateful for the timing because, I had to move back in with my parents because at that time I was essentially, I was self-employed, but not making any money yet because that's when I had just started the online school that I co-founded. We weren't accredited. And so we were working on like all the stages of getting that up and running. So I had no income essentially.
Right.
And so I went back in with my parents. And, at 33 years old, that's kind of like, like I've been on my own since I was 18 and now what the heck?
Right.
But I was so grateful that I had a safe space for COVID, because had I been living alone or different circumstances, I probably would have gone insane with all the isolation and, everything that COVID brought with it. So.
And it was probably one of those like tender mercies where like, then you didn't also have to worry so much about your parents, because you could like be there and see them. And, I know that was something that we worried about. Like we were super far away from all of our family when that happened. And so just not knowing what could happen and if you could even get to them. And it was stressful. So silver lining, right?
Right.
Like,
yeah.
In a very dark, cloudy situation.
Yes. But then there was also the added stress of, oh, well, my parents are older, and am I going to be the one that brings COVID home to them? Right.
Right.
Trying, and then the panic of, oh, but I need friends and I need connection and, but like, oh, if I bring it back, then it's my fault. And then my siblings are going to hate me and it's a whole thing. Right? So kind of a double-edged.
Did you kind of pause dating during that time, or did you like just do online? Like, what did that look like for you?
Yeah. So I would say it was probably about 6-7 months before I was ready to like put myself out there again. And, because I was just like, I just need to process this. But at the same time, I'm not getting any younger. If I still, want a family and my goals, like I can't just crawl in a hole and die. And so, So during those 6 months, I really, like I said, was introspective. I read probably more books than I've read in the last, 5 years prior. It's like personal development, growth, spiritual books, things by President Nelson, things by Sister Pierce and Sherry Dew. Like I read all the books, and I was journaling and writing and processing and kind of, finding myself again, but also learning how to let go of the fact that, I had a divorce. I was a divorced person. And, because there was that stigma too of like, you do everything in your power and any two good people can make it work. And I thought, oh, okay, well, what's wrong with me? So there was a lot of self-blame. And so it was kind of sorting through that and learning how to trust my own intuition again before, and rely on the spirit to really just get through it and say, okay, am I ready to do this? And so I reluctantly joined Dating App Mutual because I had never done online dating prior, because I always thought that it was just super shallow. Don't have a great relationship with technology. So I just thought, this is not the thing for me. But then in a COVID world, how else do you meet people? Right.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, so started kind of just having conversations here and there. And I had a few dates, some great guys, before, COVID fully shut down everything and we all went into full-blown quarantine. And then, it just kind of became connections through Mutual and just kind of having conversations, trying to get to know people, building my confidence in who I was as a person and things like that. So it was definitely an interesting experience.
Yeah, for sure. I want to just go on a little tangent for a second, because something you said kind of like, made me think of some stuff. So, our generation, obviously you and I are somewhere in that same age group, I'm assuming, where we really were, like, it really was adamantly taught over and over again that that's the most divine role that we women could achieve, is unlock marriage and mother status, right?
Yeah.
But I think that what happened is now, like, if you look at it nowadays, people look and they're like, oh my gosh, the culture was so wrong. The church taught you so wrong. And they want to blame our feelings about what we were taught on the presidency. Like they want to blame it on like church members in general. So then you see this, like, this exodus of certain people leaving the church, blaming the stigmas and the cultures and the, the practices, I guess, that don't have to be centered in the gospel per se, on everyone except for like taking responsibility for themselves. So for me, I'm right there with you. I was a little older, I didn't go through as much as you went through, but I was a little older when I got married, and I married outside of church. Like I ended up not marrying a member because pickings were slim. And my slim pickings, they were the type of guys, I love them dearly. They were like my best friends, but they literally had this concept of, I don't want to pay for a date for someone else's wife, like someone else's future wife. So they would take us like to the hospital cafeteria where you would get like $1.50 for a whole meal because they were not wanting to pay for someone else's future wife if they had no intentions of marrying us. Right. And so that was kind of, I'm not even joking. Like, I probably have that could go in your book too.
Probably. Maybe we'll do a part 2 and join it.
collect everyone else's stories. Yeah. We'll put Scott's nostril story in there.
There you go. I like it. Yes, I like it.
Yeah. And so I guess how did you not become bitter in that situation? Like, how did you really just go inside and just say, look, okay, yes, it is one of the most divine roles that we can achieve in this lifetime or in the eternities, however you want to look at it, like both, I guess. However, it's not a cookie cutter role, right? It's not something for everybody. And just because I don't have it right now or don't have it in the way I thought, that doesn't mean that I'm not going to have all the blessings of that later on and that I'm not living my purpose. And, how do you kind of like take that negativity viewpoint and turn it into like a positive one or at least a more self-centralized one where you're taking that responsibility on yourself?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I won't say that I was 100% not bitter. There were times where I went a bitter, cynical phase and was just like, well, I'm going to be single till I'm 45 and that's great. And if it happens before then, awesome. But if not, I'm just going to live my life and do my thing. Right. And so there were times where I had a cynical approach to dating for sure. And I can dive a little deeper into that in the book and just kind of talk about the things, where it's like, I give up. I don't want to do this. It's so hard. Right. And I think for me, I call myself a recovering perfectionist. I try to recognize like, all right, I'm not going to be perfect in this life, ease up a little bit. Right. So I think for people in the church, it's hard because there are a lot of us that are perfectionists. And so through, again, a lot of just self-reflection and personal development and growth, I think a big thing that I learned from my divorce was that I'm human. Like I'm going to make mistakes and that's okay. Right. And so I say that about myself. It's easier for me to then extend that grace to the prophet, the apostles, right? Like they're still humans too. They're not going to be perfect. And I know that's like weird for members of the church to hear sometimes because they think, well, they've got it all figured out. Right. But no, they're still human. They're still fallible. Like we're going to make mistakes.
And poor Heavenly Father, that's all he has to work with is poor, messed up, imperfect human beings. That's all he's got.
Yeah, exactly. And so, so like,
too.
Yes, exactly. Right. And so that's kind of what I had to tell myself was like, it's okay. Like, yes, the church culture maybe shaped how I view myself or how I view these expectations, but it's the people. It doesn't affect the fact that like, I know that I have a savior. I know that he's there for me, right? Like that is the root of what matters. And just keeping the faith in knowing that like, maybe it's not happening for me right now, but I know that if I do my part, that I will get those blessings one day, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of in that situation right now. My path is not the typical path, right? Like I don't have any biological children and I just turned 38, right? It doesn't look like it's going to happen for me. And so how do I still overcome that self-talk, that rote, we hear it all the time. Like you said, arrival is motherhood. Arrival is wifehood. Right. And so then how do you combat that when you feel, well, I'm less than because I haven't birthed my own children. Right. Like that's a very real and a very raw thing for myself, as well as for other friends and women, in the church. Right. Like, it's hard not to just have that negative self-talk of, well, you're not enough or you haven't done your part. Right. And so it's a lot of prayer. It's a lot of reflection and journaling and all the things, right? And again, some days are easier than others, and you just take the little moments. Like, I cherish the fact that I am the favorite aunt. Like, sorry, sisters, it's the truth. They're all so excited when I show up. And I get, and I, like I said, I'm a stepmom. And so I have a 9-year-old in my life that I also get to be a parent figure for too. Right. And so it's kind of like about finding those silver linings of, okay, my journey doesn't look the same as everybody else's, but how can I make the most of the journey I've been given, of the stewardship that I've been given? And how do I just kind of rise above and make the most of it? And so that's kind of, but it's a conscious choice, right? Because like I said, some days it's so easy to just cry and be angry and get mad, and this is not fair. And why do, drug addicts get to have kids and I don't get that opportunity, right? Like,
yes,
it's so easy to fall in that spiral, right? But then I try to remember, okay, but Satan is the one who tries to breed dissension and frustration and all the things. And so it really is just, kind of like the intro said, it's a conscious choice to embrace the gospel and just trust that, okay, Heavenly Father's got my back. Jesus knows what I've gone through, and I'm going to rely on them to get through this hard time. Because, everybody has something they're dealing with. Every single person. I'm amazed when I have conversations. I'm like, holy cow, I didn't know you were dealing with that. That is hard. That is heavy. Right. And so I just try to cling to the hope of the gospel so that I can get through it. Right. Because if I didn't, I would be in much worse shape than I am. And so I'm so grateful that I had the testimony that I did to kind of get through all the hard, and that it's something that I can continue to hold on to when life gets hard, because we're all going to have trials, and it doesn't get any easier, but it can be better when we turn to the Savior. And that's kind of what I choose to do.
I love that.
Yeah. I love your positive attitude. I know it's sometimes you can't have a positive attitude, but I love that you're trying to look for the good, right? And speaking of choices and making those choices, like when you think of your ex-husband, like, is there bitterness there? How did you overcome that? I mean, that's a big hit, right? Have you tried to make amends? Or what's the situation there?
Yeah, it is a big hit. And again, I'm so grateful I feel like I was immensely blessed through the divorce process. Because when he first kind of hinted like, hey, I've been, sad for the last 3 years, just have been praying that that life could just get better, and he never confided any of those things in me. I made the choice to pray and try to see him as Heavenly Father saw him, so that I could understand a little better, because I wasn't getting much from him. And so I was like, well, how can I, because at that point I was proceeding with, okay, this is going to be a hard road. Sounds like you're dealing with a lot, and I want to save this marriage. So how can we fix it? And that's how I initially approached it was, okay, I'm sorry you've reached this point. Let's try counseling. Let's do these things. And so I was praying, like, help me just have patience and love and charity so that I can get through this hard patch so that we can save our marriage. And I really think that those prayers gave me an added measure of strength, because I remember as I was, we were separated and then we were filing divorce papers and the divorce was getting finalized. I remember several people coming up to me and saying, I don't know how you're so calm and you're not just laying into him and slandering his name on social media and you're just calm. And I said, well, it's definitely not my doing, right? Because my human nature kicked in, and there were days where I was just very angry and very mad of, well, you just wasted 6 years of my life. You just wasted my best childbearing years. Now I probably won't have kids, right? Like there was all that negativity in there too. But I think because I prayed to have charity, I was able to forgive him quicker than I was able to forgive myself, ironically enough. And that was a learning experience for me. And so to this day, like I don't wish him any ill. I really do hope that he is just happy and can figure out, whatever journey he's on. really hope that he can find the peace and the happiness that he's looking for. I think for us, it was easier to cut ties because we didn't have children together. That would have been, a totally different story where it probably would have involved a lot of, counseling and figuring things out, learning how to work together in separate places. Because of that, we were able to just kind of go our separate ways. And I haven't talked to him in probably years. Every once in a while, I hear little updates from friends. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Good for him. And that's kind of the end of the conversation.
Gotcha.
But again, even that was a conscious choice, right? Because it's easy to jump on social media and say, oh, well, what is he doing now? And what is this? And comparing and getting mad. And so it's just, I think the biggest takeaway is, everything is a conscious choice to not be the victim in your life.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, take us back. So we're in COVID, we're getting ready to start dating or doing online dating. Where do we go from there?
Yeah. Just kind of doing online dating. And then I get a message one day on Facebook from this guy who I had known who he was before. So he had lived in my neighborhood when I was married and when he was married. And so he saw me on the mutual dating app and reached out and said, hey, are you divorced? And I was like, yeah, I sure am, because he had gotten divorced about 1.5 years before I did, moved out of the neighborhood, hadn't heard from him. And so then I started talking to this guy because I was like, well, at least a human that I knew, like that you're a real person. I know who you actually are. Right.
Right.
And so we started talking and decided to meet up. I was living with my parents. And so it was like a 3-hour drive to get to the big city where he was.
Wow.
So I drove up there. We met for lunch, like a lunch date. And I remember thinking, well, whatever. I'm not really like looking for anything, but this will be just a good way to maybe talk to somebody who's also been through a divorce, and maybe we can just commiserate or, learn how to move on with life. And so I kind of approached it that way. And then this date turned into a 10-hour date where we just like talked and we were connected and just had all these interests together and all these things. And it was so funny because I was staying at my brother's house, and I remember telling him, I was like, look, this is a lunch date. I'll give it till like 4:00. Like that's plenty of time. Like 4 hours, I'll probably be back before that, but just, plan on me around 4. And I remember we went to lunch, and then we were still talking at the restaurant outside because of COVID. And it's 6 p.m. and my brother's calling me.
Are you murdered?
Yeah, basically. He's like, hey,
like, what's going on?
Yeah. Yeah, he's like, use the word tomorrow if you're not okay.
Yeah.
So I love my brother. I will forever be grateful to him for that, because I was like, you were looking out for me. This is awesome.
Nice.
And so, so then I told my brother, I said, like, we're having a good time. I'll be back at the house a little bit later. Sorry that I didn't check in,
Gotcha.
And so then we keep talking, and then he decides to take me to dinner, and then we keep talking. Right. And I got back to my brother's house at like 10 p.m.
Wow.
And, it was like an epic first date where I was like, again, I can't make this up. Right. Like my life is a sitcom. It's kind of crazy. But so that kind of turned into, then I friend zoned him multiple times because I was still healing from the divorce, learning how to trust myself. And I know, bless his heart, he stuck around. And now we're married. But it was quite an interesting journey. And, I still look back and think, wow, how did I get married so quickly after the divorce? And I mean, I say so quickly, it was 2 years, but in my mind, it was still, whoa, that happened faster than I thought. Like, how could I trust another human again? Right.
Right.
But it was a lot of just self-development and prayers and learning how to trust myself again. So kind of a crazy, crazy journey. Life is funny sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So because you were both divorced, like, was there baggage there, or did that help you create a better bond together?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a little bit of both, right? Like, We definitely were more understanding of each other because we'd both been through a divorce. And so we've been able to communicate better when maybe those things do come into the relationship with the baggage, right? Of like, oh, something you said just gave me a flashback, or that wasn't good, right? Like we're able to communicate openly and recognize like, okay, you're right, that wasn't the best approach. Let's try this again, right? Because we can recognize, oh, hey, we have wounds, we have baggage, things are still going to be healing years later. But yeah, I would say it's kind of a combination of both. There are times where it's like we can say, hey, sorry, I know this is my baggage coming up, but this is what I'm feeling right now. Right. But so it's helped the communication, I think. So even with the baggage, it's created a deep bond for us to just, understand each other better and be more empathetic, sympathetic of, what our partner's going through.
Yeah. So do you feel like in a way, and I don't know, I mean, I haven't been divorced, but I've been almost divorced. Like I was very, very close to that happening. And so I guess for, looking at silver lining again, right? For those who have experienced divorce, do you feel like you kind of have a better sense of like what is a little thing to be watching for and to be doing in your marriage so that you don't get to the point where you're, either shell shocked from the other person not being happy, or you guys are just, grown apart, or, you know what I mean? Like how does this marriage and you reacting or acting in it, how is it different from your first time around?
Yeah, for sure. 100% different, I would say. I do notice the little things. It's funny you asked that because I was living with my parents after the divorce. My mom would get after my dad. You've left your shoes in the living room again, and I'm so sick of putting them away, right? Like just the annoyances, the little annoyances. Yeah. And I would just look at her and be like, Mom, it really doesn't matter. Like, let it go, And so it's kind of funny that I was like pointing it out to my mom, but I was like, but in the long run, like that perspective is like, does it really matter if they don't pick up their shoes all the time? Sure, it's annoying, frustrating that maybe you're the one that's always cleaning up the clutter, but put the shoes back and then say, hey, next time, can you try to remember this? Right. And not make it a big thing. And so I think, having the perspective of what's important. And, I like to say that I did an autopsy of my marriage and kind of broke down all the areas of like, okay, where did we grow apart? How was I maybe not showing I appreciated him? What were we doing? What were the things, right? And so constantly I will tell, my new husband, I'll say, hey, we need to, connect this week. We've both been super busy. We haven't had this much time. Like, let's sit down, let's date, right? And just kind of making it a priority because, again, relationships are a conscious choice too, right? You have to take time, you have to spend time and be present. I think what's missing a lot nowadays with technology and social media is people just don't connect anymore, right? They're in the same room, but they're on their phones doing their own thing. They're not really connecting. And so that was kind of one of the big productive things that I got, right? Because my ex-husband, he was always playing video games. And so then I would go do my own thing. And we never connected as a person. So it felt like we were just roommates most of the time, kind of just coexisting. And so now my husband and I, we make it a very conscious effort to be like, all right, let's talk about each other's days. Our phones are put away. Mealtime is when we talk. And especially when we have my stepson, we do this thing called high-low buffalo, which is talk about, the best part of your day, the worst part of your day. And the buffalo is a random thing that happened. Right. And it's just a simple way. Yeah. So it's just a simple way to like connect as a family. And it's the little conscious choices, I think. And, having gone through a divorce has helped me see that more. Like I was totally blind to it in my first marriage, but now I'm aware and can see. And so really, now I can see my divorce as a blessing because I learned, I grew from it, and I became a better person, even though it was awful and horrible and all the things. But now I can see how it blessed me and helped me become a stronger, better person.
I love that. It feels as though you're almost hyper focused on the prevention of things going wrong instead of hyper focused on oh no, this is a sign that something's going to happen that's bad. right? Because I think that sometimes, like, when we go through those rougher relationships, whether it's a breakup or a divorce or whatever else, or maybe like a stepping away from a partnership, and then we get into a relationship with someone else, we call them red flags, right? And we're like, oh no, a red flag, that means we gotta go, right? Like this is dangerous and we have to leave. But if we start looking for all of almost the white flags, like the little like surrender flags, the ones that are telling us like, hey, there's a little bit of a problem here. We need some help, like we're not going to try to make it worse. We just need to know how to make it better. It's not an issue right now, but it could lead up to one if we don't give this attention. So that's really neat that you kind of had that shift. And it sounds like your current husband is, your new husband is on the same page with you, with, hey, let's just look under the hood. Let's just see where we need a little tune up here and, a little oil there and a little more windshield wiper here and, whatever else.
For sure. Yeah. And I think there's been such a stigma around mental health for so long that like, oh, if you're going to counseling, that means you're crazy or this or that. Right. But after having gone through counseling, now after going through a divorce, we tried couples counseling and then I did individual counseling, even when things are great, that can be kind of like a tune-up, right? Like go to a therapist and have them be a neutral third party that can maybe kind of call you out on, well, are you really being fair here? Right? Like it's not always easy to see it in yourself, but when somebody else can kind of point it out and say, well, hey, let's look at it this way and kind of dissect, like, I think it's a great tool as well. And I have many couples friends that they say, yeah, we go to counseling even when things are great, because it just kind of, like you said, keeps that maintenance up and keep the awareness there, because it is so easy to just get bogged down with the day-to-day and like kids become their priority, work becomes a priority, right? And, I've read a lot of leadership books recently and it's kind of funny. And they've mentioned that, unfortunately, because of all the responsibilities and demands on our time, usually our families are the ones that get the least of us because we're just so fried by the end of the day, right? Like I've been working all day. I don't want to think. I don't want to do this. And so, making like a conscious effort to just reconnect every day, even if it is just the simple, hey, let's have a dinner and talk about our days, right? Even if it's that 5 minutes of connection, it's better than nothing. And baby steps can kind of help sustain those relationships.
So can I ask you, and if not, that's totally fine. You don't have to answer, but what were some of the things that you noticed from your first marriage that you personally could have done better? What were those holes, I guess, that were kind of sinking your ship?
Yeah, for sure. Well, just based on feedback from him as well, he said that I was a little bit too naggy sometimes, right? And I could recognize that, okay, sometimes I can be a control freak. So does it matter if the dishes aren't done when I want them to be done, if they're getting done, right? Like, again, back to just the little annoyances and things. I think that was one of them. But also just kind of being more conscious, like I've mentioned, of just, hey, let's put our phones away and let's talk and let's connect. And how are you really doing? What concerns do you have, right? Like I joke and say it's kind of like a companionship inventory, like what you do on your missions with your companion, right? Like you do it with your spouse and kind of do a pulse check, like, hey, how did you feel appreciated this week? Or what can I have done to make you feel more appreciated this week, right? Because we think that like the way that we show love might not be the way that our partner receives love. And so also understanding their love language a little more, because I remember one argument, not necessarily an argument, but a kind of a disagreement when I was in counseling with my ex-husband. We were working on like let's spend quality time together and just connect, see if there's, anything we want to salvage from this relationship. And I remember saying, well, yeah, we've been around each other, but it hasn't really been quality time. We've just been watching TV. That's not really connecting as a couple. And he kind of got upset and said, well, I've been doing all of these things and you just haven't noticed them. And I was like, oh, okay, well, please tell me what those were. Right. And then he was able to kind of speak his side. And so I think we just kind of put our blinders on sometimes and think that we know the best and don't ask enough questions. So that's something I've learned from the divorce experience is, well, just approach it with curiosity instead of accusations or I know what you're thinking, right? Like don't assume, but ask questions and dive a little deeper so that you can understand your partner a little better. And so I think in my first marriage, we just had kind of surface level communication. It wasn't really the deeper connection of addressing the hard things. And so, find someone who can get in those trenches with you and isn't scared to have the hard conversations. And so I think those are some of the biggest takeaways of like how I could have been better and what I've learned to now apply in my marriage.
That's awesome.
That's good information. I think a lot of us, I mean, especially with technology, it's so easy to get back from work and and just veg out, watch the TV, play on your phone, or I mean, Instagram reels and those kind of things, they suck you down a hole, right? Like
they do.
Technology just pulls you away. It's so easy to get pulled away from your family, from your wife. And you miss opportunities. You do. So I appreciate you being willing to share that, because that just reminds me that, it's like those reality checks you get occasionally, right? You're like, oh yeah, I probably should do better at that. Yeah. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, no problem. And I mean, I'm guilty of it too. There's still times when I'm on my phone and I'm like, oh, I just, wasted 40 minutes on Instagram. Like, okay, let's put that away. Let's go do this, right?
Well, and it's interesting because like, this is really, I think from the 2000s, from like the 2010s era or whatever on to now, we really live so differently than what all of our other generations have lived. Like a lot of the time they lived and worked farms together, and they went into the family business together. And you did have that time where you sat down and you had, not even just dinner together, but you would eat breakfast together before everyone left. And then if everyone left, you might have lunch separately, but then you'd come home and you'd have dinner together. And then there was more routine with bedtime. And it was like, the workday was just the workday. It was just, 8 hours. And then you came home and you didn't have all these other things. I know you definitely are super busy too. Scott and I, we talk about this all the time, between writing and the podcast and our work, our actual 9 to 5s and then church callings and da-da-da. Technology has made it so much easier for us to do so much more. And then social media makes it really easy to judge ourselves for not doing as much as the other person is doing. And so we fill our calendars to the point of overexhaustion, and then we have nothing left to give at the end of the day. And it's not that we're doing bad things necessarily, right? Like sometimes we genuinely are doing all of these really good things, but it's just so much more than what any other generation had the ability to do. And so we have to try to, because it's not going away, right? Like unless there's some EMP or something that happens, technology is around for a hot minute. So we have to learn how to navigate, how to work within the realms of still being, connected technology wise and still getting more done. I think that's part of just in general with Christ's second coming, is that the work is going to be hastened. Right? Like we hear about that all the time. And I think this is part of that work. It's that Heavenly Father's reserved our generations and the ones that are coming after us for a time where we are called to learn how to juggle being really actively engaged in a good cause. Right. But we have to remember that the best cause is always going to be our families, and building our relationship with them, building our relationship with Jesus Christ, with our Heavenly Father. And so, I think I went on a rabbit hole here, but basically I really love that you brought that up, right? That we have to consciously make that choice, right? I think that's kind of like the main message for today. It's just like, we have to be very conscious about making the choice and when we're going to do what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, how we're going to speak to someone. I have 2 book suggestions, and some people really hate these suggestions, but I'm a co-host, so I'm going to give them. If you don't like my book suggestions, that's okay. So, and this goes for men and women. They can both read these books. And I feel like it was a lot of what you were talking about. One is called Loving What Is. I believe it's by Byron Katie. And another one is called The Empowered Wife. I can't remember the author of that one. But those two books really helped me in my own marriage, getting through all of our junk that we went through, to see how much meaning I was giving to everything my husband was and wasn't doing, and how much meaning I was giving to everything he was saying. Like, I decided that his words and his actions meant something to me, even though he did not mean them that way at all. And all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute. So I'm literally making myself angry, right? Because I'm choosing to attach this meaning to this thing that he says or does. And it's almost like silly. You're like, oh, why would I do that? If I get to change the meaning of it, why wouldn't I just change the meaning and then just be happy about it, or just be like, oh, okay, that doesn't matter. So those are, listeners, those are two good books you guys can pick up. Is Loving What Is. That one does have, she goes through some exercises with like real people. So sometimes the people will have like, they'll like cuss a little bit. So just caution, I will tell you that. Overall, I know Scott's like Alisha, but I'm just prefacing this.
If it helps people, I'm okay with it.
The concept is really, really good. And hers is just, she recorded real conversations. So that's kind of what it is. It's like, but The Empowered Wife does not have any of that. And it is just mind-boggling to see how much control we actually have over our feelings towards another person in a situation that we're in, and circumstances and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, and then so pick up those 3 books. Go pick up Yes, No, Maybe So, Loving What Is, and The Empowered Wife. And just know that, Heavenly Father, he's got our back, right? Like he's going to help us through all of these tricky situationships and, and all of these relationships that we have. And even if we make a mistake, it doesn't have to be a mistake. It just has to be, oh, I just took a different detour to get to wherever I need to go. Right? Like your divorce is not a failure. It was just a detour.
For sure.
Your prolonged singleship was not, something you did wrong or that you weren't worthy of it. It's just another route that you were taking to get to the person that Heavenly Father needs you to be. So
100%.
Yeah.
Big picture.
Yeah. Yep. Well, yeah. And along those lines, Alisha, if you are the listener that loves recommendations for books, part of what I did in my book, Yes, No, So, was at the back. There's a whole list of resources of books that I read that helped me process my divorce, some of the personal development books that helped me, and then also just a bunch of like activities and journal prompts of things that I did to help me process and kind of work through that as well. So if you're a hands-on person, there's also helpful resources in the books for you.
That's my favorite, when there's resources, because you get done with it and you're like, well, I want more. And then where do you get more?
That's how I am. So that's why I threw it in there and thought, well, hopefully this will help somebody that's like me.
I love that.
There you go.
Very cool. And I would say it sounds like it's definitely a book for anybody. So it doesn't mean that you have to be, what do they call us? They call this an old maid. You remember that term flying around? Oh, you're an old maid because you're not married by the time that you're, 20 years old and whatever. Well, anyway, so you don't have to be in any particular status to get something out of your book. It sounds like you can definitely draw a lot of parallels and apply it to whatever situationship you have.
No, I appreciate you mentioning that, because it was really cool. As kind of reviews were coming in about my book, there was a man actually commented and said, I've been married for 40 years and I had takeaways from this book. And I thought, that's so high praise, so
that's amazing.
Yeah. And, and I've had people that are Christian or non-religious that have read as well. And even they were like, wow, this had a takeaway for us. So yeah, it's kind of, it appeals to just kind of, I think, the human nature, which is that shared journey that we're all on as well. So yeah, whether you're married, single, divorced, like whatever your status, I think there would be something that you could take away from it as well.
That's awesome. So do you have any last thoughts you'd like to share before we wrap things up?
Yeah, great question. I think if you're a person who has ever felt like a failure or like you're not good enough or any of those human experiences that we all feel, just give yourself grace and recognize the things that you have done, the experiences that you've had that have made you a stronger person. It's easy to get bogged down. It's easy to just blame and feel like a failure, but, sit down and recognize the good that you do bring to the table, because we all have something we can offer.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Well, thank you so much, Anjilee. This was such a good conversation. I always love when I don't cry on the show. Like, it always makes me happy that I can just have like a good, like, my cheeks hurt a little bit from smiling. I definitely am interested in trading some more, bad dating stories.
Yes.
Maybe we need to have a whole like month, Scott, in February of just like stories.
There you go. I can probably connect you with some college students that they have some doozies as well.
There you go.
Yeah, my oldest daughter is dating, and she spends a lot of time on Mutual, and I think it's hilarious because there's definitely types.
Yeah,
like she's got a lot of people that have like swiped up on her or whatever, and you'll go through and it's always like this guy. He's behind, there's a mountain in the background. He's got a dog next to him. There's one type. Then there's another type, and he's like at the gym with and he's like working out. It's like it's just so funny. You're like, oh, it's that kind of guy. That guy. Like it's hilarious.
Oh,
it's like rinse and repeat.
Oh yeah, it's an interesting world out there with dating.
Well, I have to say, the good thing about that is at least you guys do have pictures and profile pictures, and you can do some sleuthing.
That is true.
Back in my day, I actually met my husband online through Yahoo Personals, because it was before there were any LDS, anything, and I didn't even have a profile picture or anything like that. So I had no idea what he looked like. I had no concept of who he was. And so it's a little, I don't know, a little better, maybe.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Definitely.
Awesome.
Well,
thanks again for being on the show. It's been fun. And anybody that, wants to learn more, go check out her book. And, thanks for being on, with us on this journey to listen to her story today. All of those who listen to the podcast, make sure you go share Anjilee's story and do the 5-second missionary work. Go hit that share button and let's get that out there so that other people can hear it.
Absolutely. And we will put the link to Anjilee's book, Yes, No, Maybe So, in the description, so you guys can quickly find them if you need to. Also, we just want to thank our listeners. Like, seriously, guys, you're the best. We love having you. We love hearing from you. We love your comments. We love your outreaches. Please make life easier for Scott and I, and don't make us come chase you down. Let this be the only chase down that we have to do, and just write to us. Let us know what your story is, what can be shared, with the world. What kind of light can you spread, especially in terms of sharing the gospel, sharing the love of Christ with others, sharing positive perspective, and just really, like with Anjilee, just some really good actions that we can take. I think sometimes it's the little things that make the biggest difference in life. And when you come on and you guys share your stories, you have no idea how many little things from your story will inspire other people to be able to really change their lives. So don't be chickens. That's all I'm saying. Go ahead. Yes. You guys can head over to our page, latterdaylights.com. There's a form at the bottom that you can fill out, or you can comment, let us know, email us, whatever else. But definitely let us know what your favorite part of Anjilee's story was today. And you know what? I'm just going to say, I'm going to put this out there. Share some of your horror stories. Like, we would love to hear.
You're not alone.
Yeah. Like, what was one of your favorite bad stories, bad dating stories? Are you a Scott where you have, issues with nostrils and shoes, or
you're never going to live that one down, Scott.
I know.
Never. We're going to get all.
But I made it public. I put it out there. So I'm
That's true. Well, I can vouch for Scott. He is a much different person than what it sounds like he used to be.
Yeah.
He's figured it out, and he's got himself a great wife, and we love Darla. So
that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciated it. This was a fun conversation. So thank you.
It really was. All right, guys. Well, that's all we have for today. So just be sure, like I said, to share this story. Share comments, get in your inbox and let us know what your story is. If you guys would like to be a guest, we would love to hear from you. Hope you guys have a wonderful week. Until next Sunday, we'll see you later.
Take care. Bye-bye.